Yo, today's video is the type of video that I'd have planned months in advance and never actually follow through with, but with the recent events in the narrative of Lookism, I think this is a perfect time to talk about why James Lee is the new Charles Choi. I want to start by going over James Lee's role in the story and how I think PTJ is gonna let it shape up in the future, because I know it's quite vague right now for you who's watching and me who's writing the script, so I'd like to give you my take. I know I've said it already and it's literally the title of the video, but I think James Lee is, figuratively of course, the new Charles Choi in this story. Allow me to elaborate. Charles Choi as an antagonist admittedly adopted a very vague and sinister demeanor and, for lack of a better word, aura to his character and the way he presented himself. We didn't really know much about the guy, and this even dates back to when Daniel himself was trying to learn more about Daniel himself, with only so much as a picture of seemingly his family being given to us. It was only through gradual narrative progression and story writing that we actually got to know more about the guy, and even then, we still don't know as much as you'd think we should. Hell, we don't even know why the guy jumped off a building and took his own life. What we do know though is that he appears to have birthed the next main antagonist of the series. That is, if James Lee even is an antagonist, which I will be going over in this video. We know James Lee has no records of any biologically related figures to him. He was raised by Charles Choi and Charles Choi only. Now with the release of chapter 555, it seems his role is becoming a little clearer now, with him joining a seemingly major political party in South Korea and choosing to pull a Gaprion Kim and enter politics. The reason for this is still not known, but I think if we joined a couple of stars together, we'd be able to get pretty close. I think the main reason for James Lee's role being so ominous and the key to actually getting pretty close to figuring out what this motherfucker wants to do and whose side he's on is realizing that PTJ has done everything in his power, and that takes hyping him up and building his character in what appears to be contradictory and opposing means to put us in a state of not knowing what's going on with this guy. One chapter you think he's the final antagonist, with Daniel setting his sights on him and wanting to take him out, and another chapter you think he's on Daniel's side, with him saying Daniel is destined to be his wings, and due to Daniel's status as the main character and James's status as one of, if not the smartest character in Lookism right now, it really becomes difficult to know what this guy wants to do. James Lee's relationship with Daniel remains in a state of limbo, with us not knowing whether or not the two are actually gonna go after each other. I mean, Daniel says he wants to, but I think it's pretty obvious it won't be the case that James Lee lets this guy go after him without playing mind games or sending someone to try to take care of him first. What was revealed to us in the latest chapter as well is the fact that Ki-tae Kim is also making his preparations, but his relationship with James Lee is vague as fuck as well. So what's actually going on? His relationship is unknown with Daniel, his relationship is unknown with Ki-tae, so what the hell do we even know about this guy? Now that I've mentioned Daniel and Ki-tae, we can actually dive deeper into what James Lee's plans are, and it becomes noteworthy that in Lookism, a manhwa that has evolved or devolved, depending on your taste, from a manhwa that was seemingly dominated by slice of life into a purely delinquent focused manhwa, there are two types of strength. One is pure fighting prowess, being able to hit your opponent with enough force to put them to sleep temporarily or permanently, and the other, which was overshadowed initially but is becoming much more important now, is political prowess and authority. It was initially unclear to us why Gaprion Kim decided to pursue politics, with many of us passing off his attempts of getting into office as PTJ's attempt at embodying the life of Kim Do-han and Gaprion Kim, and I think that's both true and false at the same time. Gaprion Kim, the legend of the pre-generation, had already achieved what was considered to be the most you can achieve in terms of fighting prowess in the pre-generation. He drove the Yamazakis out of Korea and was hailed as the strongest member of the pre-generation. He was always known as someone who had the will to protect, yet he seemingly wanted to give up fighting and protecting his people and enter politics. No, Gaprion never gave up on protecting his people, but the way I see it is Gaprion came to the realization that he really had no power. He may have had the ability to protect his friends from the evils of the Yamazaki, who may very well have had political prowess of their own, but once he drove them out, there was nothing he was able to do about the evils of the opposing political parties in South Korea. He could try his hardest to jab and teep his way through it, but it wouldn't be enough, which is why I think Gaprion Kim pursued politics. He needed a way to protect his people when his fists became meaningless and his romanticism no longer romantic. He was just another prole under the authorities, and there was not a single thing he could do about that. Hence, he entered politics. Now, what relevance does this hold for a character like James Lee? Well, James Lee is someone who, like Gaprion Kim, has the strive for authority. Gaprion Kim's conquest to enter politics may have been to protect his people, and James Lee entered politics maybe so he can occupy a society with no evil. At least that's what he tells us. But either way, the main thing they both needed to seize in order to make their goals achievable was authority. James Lee doesn't want to be someone whom you can just kick and punch to take down. He wants to slowly turn himself into someone who's the best of both worlds, which is what Gaprion Kim tried and failed to do. And this is why I mentioned political prowess. This has been clear for quite a while now, but in order for James to truly turn himself into someone undefeatable, he must be the strongest both in terms of fighting prowess and in terms of political prowess, which makes for the perfect antagonist for Daniel. In order to truly be a perfect protagonist, I believe you must have the biggest wall in front of you, and in order to overcome this wall, Daniel would have to take down James Lee. It becomes convenient that James took part in the killing of Gaprion Kim, right? Charles Choi wanted him to be taken down because Gaprion was trying to achieve what Charles wanted most. Gaprion had already been the strongest in terms of fighting prowess, and all he was missing was political prowess. Charles Choi needed to take him down in order to replace him, because he wanted the same exact thing. When it came to political prowess, he was becoming one of the most influential figures in the entirety of South Korea, and when it came to fighting prowess, he had James Lee, Jong Gun, Gu Kim, and I think Ki-tae Kim under him, and he was also one of the strongest fighters in the pre-generation. The man needed nothing but to take down Gapyeong Kim. Now I think I can make it clear why I think James Lee is the next Charles Choi. He took part in the killing of Gapyeong Kim not merely because he was an obstacle in front of Charles, but he was an obstacle in front of him. James Lee became the peak of the first generation, taking down and dismembering what looks to be every opponent he's faced, save for a few, in order to remove them as obstacles in his way. Now that Charles Choi, his biggest political obstacle, who PTJ has made it clear to us that he's in his way for ages now and has been using him, has passed away, it's the perfect time for James Lee to take this opportunity to seize political prowess, and with chapter 555, he's doing exactly that. I think James Lee's role in the series is becoming the perfect wall for Daniel to overcome. There was nobody in the pre-generation that could really challenge Gapyeong Kim due to two reasons. Number one, he had no ill intent from what we know. I mean, that part's still not fully clear, but there was no reason for a protagonist in that generation. It was him. And the second reason was his status as the hero of his time, which puts everyone on his side already. He just had that reputation and that aura that made you want to be on his side and not against him, unless you wanted to replace him. And that's where Charles Choi and James Lee come in. For Daniel, the perfect obstacle for him would be someone that would bring him to his limits in terms of fighting prowess, meaning the strongest character in the verse, and someone that would need him to use his most important quality that writers often give to their protagonists, which is their ability to make people come together and form a team. The biggest team he can form in order to take down James Lee from a political and ideological standpoint as well, the same way James Lee had to do with Charles Choi. I think James Lee will be the replacement for Charles completely, who attempted to be the replacement for Gapyeong, and he will be the one who achieves being the strongest both fighting prowess wise and the strongest politically, the most authoritative, and nobody having control over him. Nobody's ever really had control over James Lee anyway, except for one person, which is Charles Choi, the person who raised him and the person who he currently aims to replace. Whether or not James Lee really is evil is not really that important right now, because if he was evil, then that would make him the perfect obstacle for Daniel to take down, and if he wasn't evil, it would make for a sick moment of revelation for Daniel near the end of the series. But what's important right now is acknowledging the fact that James Lee is not the only prominent figure in Lookism. With the release of chapter 555, we were also introduced to what seems to be Ki-tae Kim's army, damn near the entire first generation excluding the motherfuckers they already beat by the looks of it, and Elite's right-hand man, along with many other characters that have yet to be revealed. Ki-tae's plans become a lot less vague when you find out what James' plans are, and they've already been semi-revealed to us in the series. But I'm gonna leave the whole Ki-tae discussion and his relationship with James Lee for another video coming very soon. For now though, I think I've done my best at making it at least semi-clear why I think James Lee is the next Charles Choi, with his pursuit of political prowess being even more significant than his fighting counterpart right now, and his overall goals and reasoning for pursuing those goals and wanting to replace Charles Choi. I of course haven't gone over Ki-tae and his role in all of this yet, so if you'd like a video on that, stay tuned. Peace.